Number 5, Observer. Observer, a 2017 release from Bloober Team. That's a great name, Bloober Team. The same studio behind the acclaimed Layers of Fear series, as well as the Blair Witch and The Medium. So if you're a fan of those ones, hop on in. Observer is a unique psychological horror game set in a cyberpunk-style dystopia heavily inspired by the classic sci-fi film Blade Runner. Observer wears its inspiration on its sleeve, even going as far as to cast Blade Runner's villain, Rutger Hauer, as the protagonist, Daniel Lakowski, who is an observer, hence the name, there we go. The Observer is a futuristic police officer who can hack into people's brains and scan their memories. This is like a Black Mirror nightmare come to life. After receiving a call from his estranged son, Daniel is sent to investigate a possible killing in a rundown apartment block where he finds a, body. It's headless, it's horrible. It's the worst thing you want to find. It's a horror game, you know what's up. From here, a lockdown is triggered and Daniel must discover what has caused the murder, where his son is, and what is locking the building down, and of course, what is going to be a very long night. It's a ride, you're in for a treat. The game is a first-person perspective with emphasis on exploration, investigation, and stealth over combat. It's kind of like Batman, dare I say, with a heavy atmosphere. Where the game shines is any of its observation sequences, where Daniel gets to hack into other person's, consciousness, seeing twisted virtual dreams that start to blend into the real world, keeping you wondering what's real and what's, an old man's implants just malfunctioning. The classic situation, which is which? The atmosphere of Observer is incredible, with few other games doing what they accomplished here, painting a very hyper-focused picture of a claustrophobic rundown dystopian apartment block, creating a haunted digital nightmare that will leave you cold, paranoid, and fearful, all the while wanting to explore every end of the building. It's a little twisted. Observer is available on current and last generation consoles as well as Steam, and if you're a fan of horror, if you're a fan of cyberpunk, and if you're just a fan of video games, it comes with a hearty recommendation from our boy Taylor Smith. Number 4, Hellblade, Sinewa Sacrifice. Coming to us from Ninja Theory, the team behind Heavenly Blade and The Devil May Cry, where Dante didn't look like Dante. Sinewa Sacrifice is an intense third-person horror game set in a dark fantasy world inspired by Nordic culture. You play Sinewa, a young woman trying to make her way into Helheim to confront the goddess Hela and attempt to save her fallen lover. Now, Sinewa believes herself to be cursed, when in actuality she suffers from psychosis, and the game really makes you feel like you are too. It's kind of twisted. The entire time you experience these audio hallucinations, talking to you at every moment, questioning your every decision, yelling at you randomly, speaking to you, and even guiding you when needed. With headphones on, you'll actually feel like you've got voices in your head. It's so scary. It's incredibly creepy and immersive in that fantasy way that only video games as a medium can be. Sinewa's gameplay is mostly about exploration and puzzle solving, featuring some really inventive stuff with the environments, trying to find patterns and runes in the natural formation of things to progress, traveling through different gateways and portals to slightly different dimensions. It all sells the feeling of not being all there mentally. There's no heads-up display or anything, just a dry screen, giving the game a really cool cinematic feeling as well. Whenever I play video games, I always take off the HUD. I'm like, let's just do it, let's just live it. Because it immerses you into the storyline. You don't have things distracting you, right? Which, in this case, is chock full of tons of paranoia and horror, so you're the one to dive in that. You'll face off against spectral warrior enemies, and while the combat isn't going to take home any gold stars per se, it's frenetic and tense enough to keep you sweating the entire time. The game warns you that should you fail a combat sequence too many times and die too many times in a row, the game will outright delete your save file at that point, and then you'll have to start over from the beginning. That's terrifying. That's the scariest part I've heard so far. With that in mind, in the back of your head the entire time, each combat encounter feels desperately personal, with a feeling of real stakes. Imagine Mario Party? Yeah, spin a 4. If you get a 3, delete. Number 3, Until Dawn. Yes, who doesn't love 80s slasher movies? This is good. They're one of my guiltiest pleasures. I love seeing a series of stock archetype one-note characters get cut down by a cool monster wearing a goalie mask, of course. Don't worry, he's actually quite nice in real life, not that scary. Until Dawn, the 2015 game from Supermassive Studios, offers us a chance at directing our very own cult 80s slasher movie, right? The premise is as simple as you'd want. A group of teenage school friends go up to a cabin in the woods for the ultimate party in a secluded spot in the Albertan mountains. Just what you want every summer, of course, our dream. Am I including this game because it takes place in Canada? Entirely possible. As you'd expect, the teen finds there's something else in the mountains with them, something haunting. And you'll have to do their very best to survive until dawn. Yeah, you guessed, that's cool. That's the title. Until Dawn puts you in control of all the various characters throughout the night, and you'll have to do everything you can to keep them alive, making split-second choices and decisions that can have consequences that you might not expect. A wrong move can lead your favorite character suffering a grisly fate right in front of you, leaving you guessing and afraid, really putting you in the shoes of these helpless fools. These helpless teenage dreamers. This game is a great time, regardless, but if you really want to see Until Dawn at its best, get a few friends over, grab some popcorn and pizza, live it up, turn it into a co-op game by passing the controller around as each character's perspective. The game implores you to do this, and now we on Top 5 Scary implore you to do the same. Until Dawn captures all the stuff we love about cheesy horror movies. Getting to see it unfold for you personally also makes it seem like Until Dawn is a horror movie catered to your own personal tastes. Do you want to see everyone suffer the most horrific fate possible? Great, go for it. Intentionally blow the entire thing, or are you looking to see your survivors harden into tough as nail warriors and, make it through the night with everyone possibly, hopefully, coming home? Well, your quick wits and decision making will be all that you have to rely on, so kill it. Until Dawn's gameplay is very simple, comprising almost exclusively of quick time events, including all combat, so it's ideal for those who don't even game that much to just hop in. Really couldn't recommend this one enough. The studio has also put out The Dark Pictures and The Quarry, which are spiritual successors to Until Dawn, and all worth it in their own right. But the original stands the strongest, in our opinion. You can find Until Dawn on PS4, and it usually goes on sale for less than the price of a movie ticket, so wait around a bit. Number 2, Soma. Soma comes to us from Frictional Games, the Swedish development studio that proved themselves to be masters of horror, giving us Amnesia, The Dark Descent, and defining the indie horror game scene for years to come. Amnesia was a hard act to top, I'm not gonna lie. While some might disagree, Soma is an excellent successor. Soma is a first-person exploration horror game, putting us in the eyes of Simon Jarrett. Also, have to shout this out quickly, but Simon lives in Toronto, and I don't know how many Torontonian viewers we have here, but you have no idea how massive it was to play a video game where you go to Osgood Station, you know what I mean? Simon, a bookstore clerk who after a car crash goes in for a medical experiment, he finds himself awaking hundreds of years in the future under the sea after a cataclysmic event has wiped out humanity. Yeah, just the ideal scenario. Wear a seatbelt, I guess. Simon finds himself as humanity's sole survivor, trapped alone, far away from home, surrounded only by machines that believe themselves to be human beings, and mysterious creatures that are vicious, horrific mergings of machine and flesh wandering through the deserted halls of the undersea research station. It's yucky. Soma is terrifying in a way that gets underneath your skin. It doesn't rely on jump scares, per se. In fact, there's almost none in the game whatsoever. The terror, rather, comes from the indescribable feeling of being completely alone. As you and Simon explore the facility, you'll do your best to piece together what happened, and you'll find yourself, the player, asking questions you have difficulty answering. It's really difficult to talk about Soma without giving away too many beats about its plot, obviously, but if you're a fan of sci-fi, especially anything like AI, like Westworld, or even Blade Runner, well, you'll find yourself right at home in Soma's extremely existential storyline. Something worth shouting out also is Soma actually has an option to toggle off the monsters entirely. So if you want to solely experience the storyline without any of the stealth sequences whatsoever, and while it might sound strange removing all the enemies from the game, it actually really works here. Since so much of the game is actually about feeling empty, it serves the atmosphere quite well in that case, so worth a shot. If you struggle with difficulty in games too, it's a perfect option for those who are just looking to experience the unique storyline, It's also kind of like a horror movie, right? Soma is available on PS4, Xbox One, and Steam. And last but certainly not least, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Yeah, this one I've played for a hot minute, so it's scary. When it comes to survival horror, we need to pay respects to the old masters. Absolutely. Resident Evil has been king of survival horror and goofy cutscenes since 1998, and Resident Evil 7 might genuinely be one of the best of them all. The series' traditional third-person and fixed-camera perspectives is amazing. It's always a good time. Moving from the series' traditional third-person and fixed-camera perspectives, Resident Evil 7 puts you in the first-person driver's seat. It is terrifying. Protagonist Ethan Winters finds himself trapped in a Louisiana plantation looking for his wife, and he ends up the victim of a sadistic family of seemingly immortal, regenerating hillbilly lunatics. Yeah, that game. You're probably thinking, oh, I've seen that. Yeah, it's terrifying. It looks very real. It's quite new, this one. This game is horrifying. While Resident Evil has always drawn inspiration from American horror cinema, namely things like Night of the Living Dead or Evil Dead, Resident Evil 7 draws from grittier sources, with the influences of that of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or Saw, or Hostel, all being uncomfortably present, right? The things that happen to Ethan in this game are enough to put you in therapy. It is wild. My hands were sweating, certainly playing this. Ethan finds himself infected with the same substance affecting the family, meaning he can take unbelievable amounts of physical punishment, and boy howdy, does he ever. Yeah, and you see it all in 4K. It's one of the few video games that I forgot was a video game, you know what I mean? It's kind of like Red Dead Redemption. You're like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. This is crazy. If you're feeling particularly brave, you can play Resident Evil 7 in VR, in an experience that's so horrifying it's almost too much to handle. I can't even play VR normally, let alone VR horror. Are you kidding? I play the mini punning and I'm like, this is too much. This is Black Mirror. I'm out. It puts you as close as possible to the horror around you. Slowly creeping around the disgusting Baker estate, desperately hoarding what life supplies you can find, while of course trying to elude your seemingly immortal psychotic captors, will have you standing on the edge the entire time. You'll literally be standing up while you play, like you're 8 years old playing GameCube. It truly feels like you're fighting for your life the entire time. As a longtime Resident Evil fan, number 7 surpassed my expectations and brought the series back to its rightful place as king of horror. And if you're a new fan, it's the perfect place to jump in the madness. The follow-up to Ethan's story, Resident Evil Village, is spectacular as well, and I wish we had time to talk about it, but alas, we don't. That's what part 2s are for. They're both excellent, but the horror in 7 is simply unmatched. That's all I'm saying. In my opinion, the absolute scariest game on the market right now, and it might not be topped for a long time. Comment down below if you agree, disagree. Also, comment down below your favorite game. Can't believe they're doing horror on VR now. That's the worst thing I can ever imagine.
Number 5, Left 4 Dead 2. Up first on our list is Left 4 Dead 2, the sequel to Valve's 2008 smash hit Left 4 Dead. Left 4 Dead 2 changed the game entirely, revolutionizing the zombie genre and reinventing everything you knew about Left 4 Dead by taking the exact same game and setting it in Louisiana instead of Pennsylvania. Now the actual game is amazing. I could hark sweet nothings about Left 4 Dead all day. The 4-player co-op zombie survival game was some of the most fun you could have with an internet connection back in the day. I probably lost hundreds of hours of my 8th grade playing Left 4 Dead 2. But if you happen to live somewhere like Australia or Germany, you wouldn't have been able to have played Left 4 Dead 2 at all, since because of its intense depictions of violence, the game was deemed too heinously gory to be sold, classifying it as too violent to be sold as an MA-15 game, the highest rating Australia had at the time. Valve tried to fight back against the classification as much as they could, insisting that all the violence depicted in the game was against zombies, who are no longer human. They just look like humans and fall apart pretty easily. The workaround? Valve released a heavily censored release of Left 4 Dead 2 for international markets, which removes just about everything yucky. No missing limbs, no guts, gore, blood, and piles of bodies are all gone out of the Australian release. Oddly, and possibly as an apology for removing content, the German release of Left 4 Dead 2 also heavily censored all the violence, features weaponry not available in any other releases of the game, all ported over from Counter-Strike's source. Pretty funny to note as well, the cover art for Left 4 Dead 2 is a severed hand missing a couple fingers, with 2 fingers held up to denote that it's Left 4 Dead 2, like this. Well, because that gesture is considered rude in England, the cover was replaced there with a variant where the hand is facing backwards. And hey, on the off chance anybody from Valve's watching, if you guys wouldn't mind, I really would like another Left 4 Dead. Don't forget to subscribe for more horror content coming your way every day. Number 4, Silent Hill Homecoming. Silent Hill has always been one of the most terrifying video game series on the planet. When you think of the hulking Pyramid Head or any of the other flesh monstrosities that wander the restless dreams of that town, Silent Hill has always been good at making your hair stand on end. Silent Hill Homecoming was the 5th Silent Hill released, and the first by a studio that wasn't Team Silent. The player is put into the boots of Alex Shepard, a Spec Ops combat veteran returning to his hometown, not of Silent Hill, but its neighboring town of Shepherd's Glen. It's a homecoming, if you will. Now the actual game is okay. I'm too close to Silent Hill to speak about the series fairly. I wouldn't say it's the scariest Silent Hill, and it's not the best, but it's also not the worst. It's kind of just right in the middle. But it's the only game in the series that was ever outright banned. The game contains some pretty intense violence, probably the goriest entry in the series, I would say. A scene in particular depicts our hero Alex struggling against a cultist enemy, and if Alex fails the event, Alex gets a drill into him violently, and if he succeeds, the cultist gets the drill, so either way, somebody is losing bad. And that someone is the nations of Australia, Germany, and Japan, as the game was refused classification for Australia and Germany, and speaking of which, those two are going to come up a lot on this list, as they really do not like violence in their games. Japan is a little more confusing, as I couldn't find why the game was never sold in Japan. Violence doesn't usually tend to get a game banned in Japan, so it's unknown why it was never available there. But to our Japanese viewers, I gotta say, you're really not missing out on too much. Don't worry. Number 3, Agony. Agony, 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 Agony. I was working at a video game store when this one came out, and boy do I remember the controversy around it. Our store only got a single copy of the game. Agony was a 2018 survival horror game that set out on a mission to be the most disgusting game ever released, and in a lot of ways, they achieved that. Agony follows the story of a lost soul condemned to hell with no memory of their former life, and like anyone who'd be trapped in hell, are trying fruitlessly to escape. Agony's main selling point was its intense depiction of hell, overflowing with blood, gore, fire, and brimstone. Agony is pretty much non-stop gooey gore from the second the game starts. The game was actually heavily censored before even being released, as initial ratings of Agony received the infamous adults only rating, which would have prevented it from being sold in major retailers or online platforms. So the final product had to be heavily edited just to even meet the M17 rating, the highest rating the ESRB gives out. I feel like it's worth throwing this out there if you're hearing about this and you think that I made Agony sound kinda cool and you want to check the game out. I'll let you know that the controversy seems like it was more a marketing thing because the actual game is kind of bad. For all its overwhelming gore, it gets really dull fast. You know, you walk into one room full of nightmarish, incomprehensible walls of 1,000 wretched faces screaming and crying blood, and really, you've seen them all, you know? The game gets pretty samey really fast, and the actual gameplay is really dull despite its environments. After its release, it became clear that Agony was nothing more than a maypole for controversy. Number 2. Condemned: Criminal Origins. Condemned: Criminal Origins was a launch title for the Xbox 360 all the way back in 2005. So I wouldn't be surprised if you forgot about it. It was a first-person survival horror game where you played a detective built like a linebacker, hunting a serial murderer on the trail of a series of condemned buildings, obviously, all the while being attacked by populations of the city who have all gone violently mad by some mysterious force. Now, Condemned is probably the scariest game on this list, and I'd go so far as to say it's one of the scariest games I've ever played in my life, drawing major inspiration from films like Seven, Silence of the Lambs, and Saw. Condemned is the kind of game that makes you feel like you'd need to take a boiling shower afterwards and scrub yourself. The game is entirely in a first-person perspective, and you really feel like you are knee-deep in the filthy grime of the city. So what banned Condemned? Well, in Germany, the game was refused to be sold because of a law stating that any depictions of cruel or otherwise inhuman acts of violence against human beings in a manner which expresses a glorification, which really could describe any of the video games I listed today. Interestingly, unlike a lot of the other ones on this list, Condemned was actually banned after it was released, not before. Its sequel, Condemned Bloodshot, was also banned for the exact same reasons. Now, for what it's worth, Condemned is pretty vile and pretty scary. It's a testament to how disturbing the game is in its depictions of horror, foregoing supernatural elements and trying to depict the situation as realistically as possible. You do have to admit, it is kind of ironic too that when you think about it, the game itself was condemned. Still, nonetheless, if you're feeling brave and up for it, I would recommend checking it out. It is horrifying. Number 1. Manhunt. There could not have been any other game at number 1 on the list about banned horror video games. If you're passionate about horror games and you know your horror game history, you were probably already expecting for Manhunt to show up. When you really think about it, Manhunt is probably one of the most infamous video games ever released. Manhunt comes to us from Rockstar Games, who are definitely no stranger to controversy, being the developers behind Grand Theft Auto. If anything, they welcome controversy, even going so far as in the early days paying for bad reviews for the GTA games to make them seem cooler. A contraband video game, what kid wouldn't want that? Well, Manhunt was a similar situation. Almost all of Rockstar's games see you playing a criminal of some kind, be it a thug, an outlaw, or a high school bully. But Manhunt has you playing as a death row inmate who is kidnapped by a sick benefactor known as the Director, who communicates to you through an earpiece, and in exchange for your freedom, wants to watch you take out members of various gangs across the city while he watches you on hijacked CCTV cameras for his sick pleasure. As the player fights off depraved gangsters, criminals, and one particularly memorable delusional chainsaw-wielding naked pig mask-wearing psychopath, you'll find yourself caught in a grisly web. Now, video game violence has always been a very touchy subject. What is too realistic? Where is the line? Manhunt very intentionally walked that line. A quote from ex-Rockstar developer Jeff Williams, who contributed to Manhunt, had this to say: "The game just made us all feel icky. It was all about the violence, and it was about realistic violence. We all knew there was no way we could explain away this game. We all knew we were crossing a line. There was almost a mutiny in the staff over it." A Manhunt sees the player executing people for the pleasure of the Director, all using household objects and disturbingly realistic depictions of violence. Infamously, Manhunt was involved in a real-life tragic death, with the assailant having been purported to have been obsessed with the game by friends, which led to efforts to have the game banned outright from stores. In New Zealand, owning Manhunt was actually considered a criminal charge. You could get charged for having this video game in your home. The province of Ontario restricted Manhunt to the dreaded AO rating, pulling it from store shelves. Despite the intense nature of the game and the controversy surrounding it, Manhunt went on to be a cult classic. It sold well, it wasn't banned as widespread as Rockstar had feared, and to this day, it still even has its fans. It sold and reviewed well enough to even get a sequel, which very bizarrely was exclusive to the Nintendo Wii, a console exclusively known for its family-friendly entertainment. Nothing more family-friendly than Manhunt.
Number 5 on this list is Something's in the Sea, a much shorter video game than some of the other ones on this list, but still just as terrifying. Something's in the Sea comes from Yahtzee Croshaw, longtime Lovecraftian horror fan, and the pedigree is apparent. This tense and tightly woven nightmare is his 10th game, and the experience really shows. The game focuses on the lone survivor of a plane crash who now finds themselves stranded in the ocean with nothing but a boat and the pieces of an artifact they are being compelled to reunite. Unfortunately, you won't just be fighting your limited lung capacity to bring the pieces back from the sunken depths. You'll also be trying to escape a massive undersea creature that doesn't appreciate your efforts. There's very little text in this game, and what is there contributes beautifully to the uneasy atmosphere. Apparently, this game really dives deep, no pun intended, on the sea monster that Lovecraft used to love writing about. I mean, his most famous creature, Cthulhu, was based in the sea, so I imagine you'd be getting a lot of different creatures like that in this game as well. And as we know, it's the creatures that make Lovecraft so scary. He certainly had his way with words, and I don't want to take anything away from him in that regard, but I truly believe the thing which brought him the most fame was the fact that he would write about giant, writhing masses of flesh that would resemble some incomprehensible gross thing. In this horror game, you get to travel many feet below the sea and fight these disgusting beasts. Although, if you are faint of heart or find that you have a hard time going to sleep after watching and or playing horror-related things, then I really wouldn't recommend playing this thing. Number 4 on this list is TheConsuming Shadow. The name of this game just sounds ominous as hell and like something directly from Lovecraft's mind. Cog Connected says, TheConsuming Shadow tasks the player with stopping a shadow that is trying to enter our world. If this ancient is permitted to enter our reality, then it will change the world irrevocably, tearing the very logic of existence asunder. You don't want that to happen, so you grab a shotgun or a book of spells, get into your car, and start looking for clues on which eldritch being is trying to pull a fast one. Gather enough information, save towns from corruption, and kill enough monstrous servants of the ancient, and you'll find a way to seal it. Just be careful. You literally cannot kill this thing, and the game's sanity meter means that if you slip up, you can end up taking your own life in a fit of madness. This game is part retro dungeon crawler, part adventure game, part roguelite, and its horrific atmosphere and writing are excellent. The graphics, much like Something's in the Sea, are deliberately retro. Maybe the game developers didn't intend for this to happen, but a fun side effect of this game is that not only will your in-game sanity slip, but it's possible even your out-of-game real-life sanity could be at risk depending on how long you play for. Retro graphics aren't usually super terrifying, but if they have the right story attached to them and all other elements of the game are rock solid, then they can be. Apparently this game is incredible as far as the horror genre goes and nails literally all of that, which makes this a great game for what it intended itself to be, but also a super scary horror video game that you should be very cautious with if you're the type of person that chooses to play it. Number 3 on this list is Fallen London. This one is just about guaranteed to keep you up at night if you choose to play it. Cog Connected says, Fallen London may be the best browser game out there. It's certainly the best steampunk / Lovecraftian horror / comedy browser game. In this game, London has been stolen, or perhaps sold, and buried deep within the earth. The Neath is dark, dank, and so far from the sun that the laws which govern existence are beginning to break down. You find yourself in a realm where death rarely sticks. Hell is just a train ride away, and the giant alien bats who now own London will pay top dollar for love stories. It's a sprawling world filled with countless quests and story hooks, some of which are heartwarming, some of which chill the blood. Most of the story Fallen London has to offer range from delightfully creepy to mildly discomforting, but some of it will leave you sleeping with the lights on. Go on, seek Mr. Eaton's name, I dare you. This game is constantly being added to and expanded on, and at this point, I'm afraid to estimate how long a full playthrough might actually take. The evil monsters and their designs here are all based off of a Lovecraftian horror, and even though this game isn't expressly dealing with Cthulhu or anything like that, it has been classified in that genre. It is a very scary game that you can get sucked into. Problem is that it's hard to remember what reality is and completely leave the game once you're done playing. Images of Lovecraftian monsters and evil hell bat things will cycle through your mind as you're trying to live your everyday life. If that sounds like fun to you, then go ahead, play it. If you do play it though, can you tell me all about it please? Because I for one will not be partaking in a playthrough myself. Number 2 on this list is The Darkest Dungeon. So this game walks an interesting line between gothic horror and Lovecraftian horror, which makes it all the more scary in my opinion. Cog Connected says, in this game you play as the heir to a dilapidated and monster-infested estate, directing a group of flawed heroes to try to make up for your ancestors' terrible mistake. Seeing as the estate is now absolutely infested with the undead and more esoteric, sanity-destroying foes, keeping these heroes alive and sane is easier said than done. The focus on the many ways your hero can self-destruct makes this game genuinely uncomfortable at times. Darkest Dungeon sets out to address the psychological stress of adventuring, and good lord, does it succeed in making dungeon diving seem like the worst job in the world. Even being night guard at Freddy Fazbear's might be preferable, and the ancient portal under the estate is still threatening to let terrible things into our world. Gothic horror and that genre has always been particularly scary to me, so mixing that with the always terrifying and gruesome Lovecraftian stuff, that really makes it a match made in scary heaven. I think that the best word to describe this game is truly uncomfortable. Even at the low points of the plot, you never really feel like you can sit comfortably. There's always something just around the corner waiting to get you, and it just gives the person playing this an overwhelming sense of anxiety all the time. And finally, number 1 on this list is The Call of Cthulhu. This is probably the most famous Lovecraftian horror video game, maybe ever. The breakdown of the game is as follows. Private investigator Pierce is sent to look into the tragic death of the Hawkins family on the isolated Darkwater Island. Plunge into a world of creeping madness and shrouded old gods within Lovecraft's iconic universe. Your mind will suffer, balancing a razor-thin line between sanity and psychosis. Cryptic clues, shadowy figures, and pure terror bar your way as you fight to retain your sanity and solve an otherworldly mystery. I watched the trailer for this game, and it is unsettling to say the least. I haven't personally played it because that would kind of go against the title of this video, but damn, it looks like a lot, guys. Like, the main character goes through a freaking roller coaster of emotions during that trailer, so I can only imagine what the full game experience is really like. During the trailer, there are a bunch of lines of text that flash up, basically little highlights of reviews that people have made of the game. Terrifying, unsettling, horrifying, will keep you up at night. These are just a few of the things that those reviews were constantly saying. Obviously, this game is a masterpiece in the Lovecraftian horror genre, but it might be a little too good. Lovecraft stuff is scary enough just in my imagination, let alone playing it all out. If any of you folks have actually played this game before, then I would love to hear about it firsthand. Do you recommend it, or should we stay away?
Coming in at number 5, we've got The Three Kings. After blowing up on r/nosleep, this game actually spawned its own subreddit of terrifying games you can play alone in the dark. No uncles necessary for this one either. The author behind The Three Kings says it's not so much a game as it is a way to access the shadow side, which really is what most demonic games involve, isn't it? You gotta look into other dimensions to find demons, you know. Before you begin, make sure you're in a good headspace. If you're under the influence of intoxicants or in a negative zone, you'll have an especially bad time. The goal of the game is to invite 2 other spirits into your home and figure out who is your queen and who is your fool. The spirits are going to do the same, seeing as the game is called The Three Kings. To play, you have to set up 3 chairs, 2 of which will support mirrors. Your throne should be placed between the 2 reflective recliners. Set an alarm for 3:30 a.m. and head to bed. When you wake up, you'll have exactly 3 minutes to grab your candle and make it to the chair. If you can sit and have your candle lit by 3:33 a.m., it's time to begin. Stare into the darkness with the 2 other mirrors in your periphery. Do not look at the mirrors, do not look at the candle. There should be a fan running behind you, so you need to use your body to shield the flame. You've got to stay sitting there, staring at the darkness until 4:34 a.m. The author encourages setting up plenty of fail-safes as well. The fan behind you is actually to keep you safe. If your body suddenly moves, then the candle goes out, ending the ritual. A loved one is encouraged to be on standby to rouse you at 4:34, either by calling out to you or dousing you with water. No touching. You're also supposed to bring an object of power with you, like a favorite childhood toy or a piece of significant jewelry. Otherwise, things can go very awry. The actual happenings in this game are for you to find out, but don't try unless you're ready for some consequences. Coming in at number 4, we've got The Devil's Face. This is a little simpler than The Three Kings, but can end just as badly. Take 12 candles and lock yourself in a bathroom with a mirror right before midnight. Turn off the lights, face the mirror, and light all of your candles in a row. Once you're ready, close your eyes and keep them closed until the stroke of 12. If you displace your lids at the perfect time, you'll find yourself face to face with the devil. No pale moonlight. It seems like a harmless game, but let's be real. Is the devil gonna let you see their face and get away scot-free? Not likely. So if you want to play this game, maybe make peace with the world before you try. Coming in at number 3, we've got One Man Hide and Seek, or actually One Man, One Doll Hide and Seek. To play this game, you need a laundry list of interesting items. It takes a while to set up, so be ready for some prep. Collect the following: a doll, rice, a piece of your fingernail, red thread, a tub of water, some salt water, a television, and some sort of fire. Once you've got all your materials, it's time to play. Replace the stuffing in your doll with rice and toss the piece of fingernail in there as well. Sew it up with that red thread, toss it in the tub of water, and give it a name. I think I'd call mine Smarv, but hey, that's just me. Once your doll is submerged and given a title, you better run and hide. Turn off the lights and turn on the TV. Take a mouthful of salt water, but don't swallow. If you manage to do all of this, you're ready to play. Wait in your hiding spot for 1 whole minute, and then it's time to seek. If everything went according to plan, the doll will no longer be in the tub. And you'd better start searching quick, because nobody wants a haunted doll hiding in their home. If you're able to locate the terrifying toy, you've won. Dribble your mouth salt water on it and prove your dominance or something. But once the doll dries out, you have to burn it, because there's no being too careful in a situation like that. If you just lock it away or toss it, who knows when it might find its way back to you. Afterwards, keep an eye out for strange static coming from your television. Poltergeist fans know that this can be a sign of additional spirits roaming about. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Midnight Game. According to some unverified sources, this is an old pagan ritual used to punish rule breakers. Classic ancient people, subjecting people to untold horrors just to make them atone for their sins. Still probably preferable to prison, but hey, you can't make money off torture alone. Usually the Midnight Game is just a scary experience meant to keep people from repeating past transgressions. However, there is a chance of death. Plenty of opportunity for permanent mental scarring too. To play, wait until exactly, you guessed it, midnight. Write your full name on a piece of paper and let a drop of your blood soak in. Turn off the lights, go to your door, and place the paper in front of it. Light a candle, put it on the paper, and then knock on the door exactly 22 times. Following this, you open the door, extinguish your candle, and close the door. The Midnight Man has now entered your home. When you relight your candle, the fun can begin. You now walk around your home with the lit candle until 3:33 a.m., avoiding the Midnight Man at all costs. If your candle goes out, that means he's near. At that point, you must relight your candle in less than 10 seconds or suffer. Alternatively, you can surround yourself in a circle of salt for protection, but then you have to remain within it until 3:33. If you can't relight or make the saline circle in time, the Midnight Min will induce a hallucination of your greatest fear until 3:33. This is where the mental scarring and death come in. Be careful. Managing to move around until 3:33 without being attacked means you win. And what do you win? Well, not going nuts. That's about it. High risk, low reward. Thrill seekers only, I guess. Oh, and make sure you keep these additional rules in mind. Keep moving or you're gonna get caught. Don't turn on lights to use a flashlight. Don't go to sleep. Don't use anyone else's blood, and don't use a lighter instead of a candle. And for goodness sakes, do not provoke the Midnight Man. You catch all that? Cool. And finally, at number 1, we've got the closet game. You're literally trying to summon a demon with this one, so if that's interesting to you, go for it. If you are interested, find a closet that you can live without. I'll get to why you shouldn't be attached to this tiny room in a little bit. Shut yourself inside and make sure that there's absolutely zero light leaking in. At this point, hold up an unlit match and say, "Show me the light or leave me in darkness." Wait a moment or two and see if you feel any changes. Hearing whispering and feeling strange presences are a good sign that there are demons afoot. Now is the time to light the match, and you better do it quick. Folks who are slow draws often get pulled into the darkness. Don't even think about looking behind you either. Done correctly, the lighting the match will cause the whispers to disappear. Now, it's safe to exit the closet, but keep holding on to the match. Shut the door behind you and don't look back. And try not to use the closet too often after this, as the demon is haunting it permanently.